Ready? All right. When did you first become interested in doing research on the JFK assassination?
Well, I became interested in the subject on the day that it happened, and I, within weeks of that time, was reading everything I could get my hands on, and in fact even distributing some articles to friends and associates in early 1964. And I continued my interest when the books began to appear in 65, 66, and followed the subject in magazine articles during that period as well. While I was at the University of Wisconsin Law School in 1966 to 69, I founded an organization to discuss the subject and agitate on it. And when I was at Wisconsin, I was in law school when the Clay Shaw trial took place, and a friend joined me in a trip down to New Orleans to cover the first 2 weeks of the trial for the Daily Cardinal, the student newspaper at the University of Wisconsin. Then when I got out of law school, the year after I got out of law school, I read that Bud Fensterwald had founded an organization, the Committee to Investigate Assassinations, here in Washington, D.C., to deal with the Kennedy assassinations and the King assassination. And I came here in June 1970 to begin working for that organization.
What is your particular specialization or focus, if you have that, in the research that you've done over the years?
Well, I guess the most important endeavor has been using the Freedom of Information Act on behalf of various clients to spring loose the hundreds of thousands of pages of records that the government didn't want to release.
This is, I guess, an extension of that question, and it may relate to your answer. What do you feel is your most significant accomplishment or contribution to our understanding today of the JFK assassination case?
Well, I think it is that my most important contributions have come in the Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, which, among other things, in 1974 forced loose the January 27, 1964 Warren Commission executive session transcript, in which the members of the commission discussed the possibility that Lee Harvey Oswald had been an informer for the FBI. Certainly the lawsuit for the spectrographic analyses and neutron activation analyses performed on items of evidence in the Kennedy assassination was a long and significant saga, and not only in terms of the Kennedy assassination records and the fact that we were able to take depositions of some of the FBI agents who actually performed scientific tests on Kennedy assassination evidence, but also because that lawsuit became ultimately the vehicle for reforming the Freedom of Information Act to make it more effective.
More effective at disclosure or holding?
More effective at disclosure, because up to that time, and here we're talking about the period between 1970 and 74, the Freedom of Information Act existed in theory, but in practice the agencies simply thumbed their nose at it, and the judiciary did little or nothing to implement the act. The Weisberg case set a very bad precedent. That's by the Weisberg case, I'm referring to Harold Weisberg's suit for the spectrographic and neutron activation analyses. The D.C. Circuit, after initially rendering a decision in Weisberg's favor, reversed itself en banc with the full court sitting by a 9-to-1 vote, ruled that the Freedom of Information Act did not permit you to have access to the records of a criminal law enforcement agency like the FBI. All the FBI had to do to defeat your request for disclosure was say that they were criminal investigatory records, and that was the end of the matter. That decision set a precedent so bad that in 1974 Congress reversed it, amended the act, and made the act much more effective than it had been to that date.
Now, when you talk about the Spectro suit, the evidence there, wasn't that released to, strangely enough, to George Michael Ivica?
Well, the original records were released to Harold Weisberg long before.
Harold got it first?
Oh, sure, long, yeah.
Wrong about that. Now, why is this case, from your perspective and in general, for the perspective of the American people, why is this case so important 30 years later?
Well, I think fundamentally because the American people distrust very much the official conclusion. There's essentially a question of legitimacy. If the Kennedy assassination resulted from a conspiracy participated in by government officials, then obviously something is very wrong with the American political system. And the people want to know. They want that question resolved.
Is there any hope, in your opinion, of... Sorry. Is there any hope, in your opinion, at this late date, of conclusively solving this case?
Well, there's hope. I wouldn't say it's great hope. Obviously, the deck is stacked against you in a number of ways, most importantly because of the sheer passage of 30 years, which makes it very difficult to unravel what went on. It's likely that many of the pertinent characters are dead. Of course, we know that Ruby and Oswald are dead, and there are many other people who might have some knowledge about the case that are also dead. That makes it difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but it's certainly difficult.
Now, what evidence, in your opinion, most strongly indicates a possible conspiracy? Not necessarily who the conspirators are, but what is it about you that really, about what you've seen that indicates to you that of a probability of a conspiracy in the JFK assassination?
Well, I think the most potent evidence is still the total implausibility of the single bullet theory. It simply strains credulity to believe that a single bullet hit both Kennedy and Connally, inflicted 7 wounds on both of them, smashed Governor Connally's wrist bone, emerged looking perfectly pristine, as if nothing had happened to it in flight or when it traversed the bodies of the 2 men. That is, for me, extraordinarily difficult to believe on the basis of the present evidence and all of the attendant circumstances, including the uncertain etiology of that bullet. It's found on a stretcher. No one knows for sure whose stretcher, in a hallway 45 minutes after the assassination. All of the circumstances that surround that bullet make it difficult to believe that not only that it could have done the damage it is alleged to have done, but that it did anything at all in the actual assassination.
By etiology, do you mean the chain of the handling of the evidence?
Yes, right. Its origins. Its origins are uncertain. We don't know where it came from.
Okay. Now, after the Stone film, regardless of what you might think of the thesis in the Stone film, there was an outcry for a release of the files, and we've seen some of them recently released. Obviously, some are still withheld. This may be premature to determine which ones are still withheld, but if you know which ones are withheld, which ones would you most like to see that they're still holding
Well, first of all, the best estimate of the total number of government records subject to the JFK Records Act is in the range of 2 to 3 million pages, and that's a minimum estimate. At the moment, although the agencies were supposed to have turned over their Kennedy assassination records to the National Archives by the 23rd of August of this year, only about 800,000 pages are said to have been turned over. So we're missing 1 million to 2 million pages of the records that should be there. Secondly, even of those that should, including, I should add, at least 160,000 pages of CIA records. Of the records that are there, many of them are heavily redacted. So we're a long way from having anything approaching full disclosure in this case.
Are those agencies in violation of the JFK Records Act by not complying with that deadline? And
Yes, I would think they're unquestionably in violation of the act. There are scads of important records that researchers will want to look at, records concerning the medical and physical evidence, records concerning the appearances of CIA officials, former CIA officials, former mafiosi before the House Select Committee on Assassinations. There are just tons of records that will be of interest to researchers.
And while we're on the still secret files, I noticed a news item a week or two ago about the Central Intelligence Agency is going to be fulfilling its openness promise, and they're going to release documents 30 years and back,
Right.
50 to 63, I believe, were the dates I saw, which supposedly will include the Bay of Pigs files. Now, do you think the Bay of Pigs files and the Mongoose files would be important to help to determine the JFK assassination?
They will be important. They will be important, and I think even the documents on the overthrow of the Arbenz regime in Guatemala, which is said to be part of this planned release, could shed some light. I want to caution, however, that the CIA's historical review program, while a step in the right direction, is only a small step in that direction. The CIA's guidelines for that program still exclude from release the operational files of the agency. And those are precisely the files that would be most pertinent and of greatest interest to researchers.
In your opinion, how are we doing on time curve? Oh, good. In your opinion, this is a difficult question, and I know some people like it and some people are uncomfortable with it. But from your perspective and your experience, who do you feel, in your opinion, are the researchers who have contributed the most to our current level of understanding of the case, who've done some good work rather than much of the irresponsible work that's been done?
I think Harold Weisberg, Sylvia Marr, Howard Rothman, Josiah Thompson, all deserve high marks for their efforts. I think that presently we're seeing the emergence of a new generation of professionals, particularly medical and scientific professionals, who are getting interested in the subject and raising very pertinent issues. Dr. Aguilar, Dr. Mantic are two doctors who've recently come to the fore in the controversy with the Journal of American Medical Association over the autopsy that was conducted on President Kennedy. I think that John Newman has done some solid research on the question of Kennedy's Vietnam War policy. So that I think there's a whole new generation of critics with impressive professional credentials that are becoming involved in the subject.
Now, Dr. Manick wrote...
I should say that in your own field, the work of a very young television producer, I guess you would call him, Chip Selby, who produced, while he was still a graduate student at the University of Maryland, produced a special film, Reasonable Doubt, which examines in detail the single bullet theory, and won a Golden Cine Award for doing so. That was a very important contribution by someone in the television communications field.
Chip Selby, that rings a bell. He does he have blonde hair?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think he was one of the people. Yeah, Roger Feynman mentioned him in a letter to me.
Yes.
He had a camera at the JAMA at the second Chicago conference, I believe, up front. I think he was one of the people I let in, and I just didn't know who he was. I think that's who it is.
I don't think he was there for that.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But he's certainly, Chip is certainly, he did an impressive piece of work in that film.
Mm-hmm.
It was the United States entry at the Cannes Film Festival, I believe, and at any rate, it's a very good, solid piece of work.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was also aired on A&E.
It was been aired on A&E several times.
Yes, I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, do you think there's anything to be served by having another investigation into the JFK assassination? And if so, how would you suggest that should be done?
Well, I think it's very important to have another investigation. The American public is not satisfied with the previous investigations. They've been inadequate, and I think that the American public understands that it may be impossible to determine the truth about this case, but they want every effort expended to see that we've done as much as we can to resolve it. So yes, I think it's important to do it. As to how it should be done, that is something of a problem because you've got a very bad track record. The previous investigations, whether by executive branch agencies or the congressional branch, have been inadequate, have failed, and the question is whether to employ those mechanisms again or not. I've toyed with the idea of setting up an independent unit, somewhat akin to the Office of Special Investigations in the Department of Justice, an executive branch unit that would be equipped with subpoena power, that would not have a time limit on its activities, would not need to have a large staff, but would simply begin to conduct the follow-up inquiries that need to be done and have not.
So the logic there would be, if we're still searching for Nazis 50 years later, that we can still make an effort to search for the murderer of our president in 1963.
Yes.
Okay. Now, apparently Clinton has finally responded and has begun to appoint the board members for the review board for the JFK Records Act. Obviously, it's needed. It's needed soon. Do you think that President Clinton should become more actively involved in resolving this controversy for the American people, for history's sake?
Yeah, I think that the first thing he needs to do is to make sure that there's someone on that board who has some subject matter knowledge about the assassination of President Kennedy. The nominations so far do not suggest to me that there's anyone there that knows very much about the assassination of President Kennedy. This board is going to have an awfully lot to do in a very short period of time, and they're going to need somebody there who knows the subject.
Okay, I guess I can wrap this up with a final question, maybe a follow-up, maybe not. Because this case is so complicated, It's been referred to as a hall of mirrors. Many times journalists really don't have a grasp of the issues. It's just so confusing. And many times they're under mistaken impressions about things. They tend to ask, from my experience with the researchers, they tend to ask questions that aren't terribly relevant. And what I usually do at the end of an interview is I turn that back to my subject and say that if you were an interviewer interviewing yourself, what question is it that you wish they would ask you, or in other words, what's the heart of the matter here? What's important about this?
Well, the heart of the matter first is still the core evidence, which the media still seem not to understand very well. That core evidence indicates that more than one person has to have been firing at the president, so there was a conspiracy. Secondly, the media need to ask what areas of evidence are most worthy of being explored at this point. And I think that obviously those areas are one, the associations of Lee Harvey Oswald, and secondly, the actions of U.S. government agencies, particularly intelligence agencies, which might suggest that they had some connection to the assassination. I think there has not yet been a thoroughgoing inquiry into a lot of the areas that touch on the sensitive operations of the United States intelligence agency, and that's the area which needs to be given the hardest look.
I guess the interesting follow-up to that would be the controversy as to whether Oswald was an agent of the American government in the intelligence agencies. And do you have an opinion on that, or a level of probability of that, or do any of these new files shed light on the possibility of his interaction with U.S. intelligence in some way?
Well, I think it's too early to say, to state anything on the record about what the new files show, because we've just had them released within the past couple of weeks, and we've been too busy answering media inquiries to go through 800,000 pages, and there are more to come. So I don't think we can say at this point anything definitive about what they show, except that there are some interesting pieces of information that are emerging.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thanks
thank you.
a lot, Jim.
Sure. Mm-hmm.